You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am the Jacob Valk, and you're not. I gotta start by breaking down the NBA playoffs. Every series has one game in the books. We all know how important the first game of a series is. So for the NBA and the NHL, I'm going to tell you everything that's on my mind with all 16 of those series. It's going to be really fun. I'll start with Sixers-Wizards. It was very interesting to see how this game unfolded. On the Sixers end, you had Ben Simmons really taking a back seat. In fact, let's be honest, Joel Embiid took a back seat yesterday. The best player for the Sixers yesterday was Tobias Harris. Dropped 37 points, shot over 50% from the field. He was fantastic. He was the seminal reason why the Sixers won. You know, it was funny, I saw some people saying, hey, look, the Sixers have a big three now. Embiid, Simmons, and Harris, that's the big three. That's going to rival the Nets. Okay, look. Do the Sixers have a big three? They do and they don't. They do in the sense that they have three really, really good players. Joel Embiid is great. MVP finalist. Ben Simmons, I don't know if you would use the word great. Some people would, some people wouldn't. I'd probably lean more towards very, very, very good. But if you wanted to say that he was great, I wouldn't have too much of an issue with it. Tobias Harris isn't great. He's just very good. I mean, if you were to power rank Durant, Harden, Irving, Embiid, Simmons, and Harris, that may be the correct order. You may not need to change anything. The only thing that you could maybe change is Embiid and Irving. That's it. But Irving is better than Simmons. He's better than Harris by a mile. In a very loose sense of the term, do the Sixers have a big three? I mean, I could say that the Knicks have a big three. Julius Randle, R.J. Barrett, and Derrick Rose. It doesn't match up with the Nets. But the Sixers played really, really well. They didn't shoot the ball well, but again, the geometry of the court. The Wizards needed to respect the Sixers shooters. So it opened up lanes for Embiid. It opened up lanes for Harris. It even opened up some lanes for Ben Simmons. Now, I saw some people criticizing Ben Simmons. They really weren't impressed with what he did yesterday. I get it. He only had 6 points. But he only turned the ball over twice. He had 15 rebounds and 15 assists. He was playing good defense. I mean, I gotta tell you, it's impressive when you're not the one scoring, but you're taking note of this guy's performance. Like, even the casual basketball fan would say, wow, who's that guy who wears 25? He's all over the place. I didn't mind Simmons taking a back seat. I really didn't. Meanwhile, the Wizards really don't have much to be upset about. They played the Sixers really close. They were leading at the half, then the third quarter hit, and the Sixers took over. Now, it is noteworthy that Tobias Harris really no-showed in the second half. Of his 37 points, 28 of them came in the first half. The Sixers were down. They needed a guy like Embiid to step up, and boy oh boy did he. Of Embiid's 30 points, 21 of them came in the second half. Seth Curry scored all 15 of his points in the second half. It was interesting, the adjustment that the Wizards made. They started keying in on Harris a little bit more. So that opened up Joel Embiid a little bit more. It opened up Seth Curry a little bit more. Very, very interesting. Look, Tobias Harris kept the Sixers afloat in the first half. Then in the second half, Embiid went off and Curry went off. That's a pretty good recipe for winning if you're the Sixers. And you have Simmons being a great playmaker, securing 8 offensive rebounds. He only turned the ball over twice. Maybe you'd have liked the Sixers to have won by more than 7 points if you're a Philly fan, but they got the win. That's all that matters. As for the Wizards, they don't have anything to be upset about. Bradley Beal was dominant. 33 points and 10 rebounds. He took over, which is what he's going to need to do in all of these games, because you cannot trust Russell Westbrook. I feel like I've said it a million times in the past week, but it's the truth. I mean, if you're playing 42 minutes, if you're Russell Westbrook, you can't have just 16 points. You can't turn the ball over 6 times. He had a double-double. He was efficient from the field. Okay, I get all that, but you've got to have more than 16 points. In the playoffs, the big money guys need to step up. The Wizards had an opportunity to win that game. If Westbrook scores 8 more points, the Wizards win. Is it unfair to expect Russell Westbrook to score 24 points? I don't think so. He averaged 22 this year. You want to tell me I should focus on the other Wizards? Guys like Alex Len, Rui Hachimura, Davis Bertans, Daniel Gafford, etc., etc. I'm not going to do that. They're not stars. Westbrook is a star. Westbrook is a future Hall of Famer. He's got to step up if the Wizards are going to have any chance of winning this series. It's just that simple. Moving on now to Nets Celtics. Oh my goodness gracious. That was an infuriating game as a Nets fan. Let's be honest, in the first half of that game, the Nets were garbage. They scored just 16 points in the first quarter. The Nets were the second best team in the NBA this year in terms of points per game. They were the best team in the NBA in terms of field goal percentage, and the second best team in the NBA in terms of three-point percentage. They really did not play well. They only hit one three-pointer in the first half. They attempted 13. Guess who hit that three? It wasn't Durant. It wasn't Harden. It wasn't Kyrie. It was Joe Harris. But this is the beauty of this Nets team. They have different ways to beat you. They don't need to shoot a bunch of threes. Durant is an excellent mid-range shooter. James Harden can penetrate. Kyrie Irving can break down any defender. It was kind of impressive that the Nets were only down by 6 at the half. You had a sense that, okay, the Nets aren't out of it. They're keeping it close. The Celtics aren't dominating in this game. The Celtics did outplay the Nets in the first half, there's no question. But all that meant was they were up by 6 at the half. That's not an insurmountable deficit. Especially for this Nets team that really thrives in winning time. When it's time for the Nets to go on a big run, more often than not, they do it. And in the second half, they did. They found their groove. The big three took over. They combined for 49 points in the second half. It was a combination of the big three stepping up offensively and the whole Nets team stepping up defensively that resulted in the Nets winning by 11. I mean, realize this. The Celtics scored just 93 points. This is a team that usually scores 112.5 points per game. To hold them below that average by almost 20 points is really impressive. Kevin Durant did a fantastic job on Jason Tatum. Tatum shot just 30% from the field. For him to only have 22 points, that's a victory for the Nets. I mean, Tatum did a great job of getting to the free throw line. That's why he scored 22 points. But to limit Tatum to shooting just 6 for 20 from the field, that's impressive. Another thing that's worth noting, the big three took 58 shots. The rest of the team took 26. Less than half. Now you may be thinking to yourself, well, of course. Look, I don't have the specific numbers on this, but in watching the Nets in the regular season, and I watched every game, the big three took over more on Saturday night than they did in any other game. I mean, Harden had the ball in his hands more than he usually does. It was honestly great to see. Like, yes, when you have James Harden out there, and he's the only one of the big three in the game, let him create. He was getting to the free throw line. He was attempting those vintage step-back threes, which he wasn't hitting, and that infuriates me. I mean, you can tell when Harden is gearing up for a step-back three. With the Rockets, he'd hit those 100 times out of 100. With the Nets, I can count on one hand the number of times I've seen him hit a step-back three. I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad thing. The Nets are winning. Harden has taken on more of a playmaking role, and it's working. I'll say this. I can't think of a player in NBA history who has changed his game as much as James Harden has after switching teams. Harden went from being the guy who would score 30 points to being the guy who sets up his teammates to score 30 points. And he seems to be happy in that role. Sometimes, when you're the alpha dog for so long, and the entire team is reliant on you to go off and give superhuman efforts, that wears on you. It wore on LeBron. It's one of the reasons why he went to the Heat. He said this at the time. He wanted to take a step back and not have to put up 1,000,000 points to win a game. He could get the ball to Wade or to Bosch and they could score. The reality is there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Look, the Nets did not play great on Saturday night. To shoot just 8 for 34 from beyond the arc isn't going to work most nights. But you know what? If you can clamp down defensively and out-rebound the other team, you can live with it. The Nets didn't shoot well, but they did everything else really, really well. The Nets weren't great, and they still won by 11. That's pretty scary. I will say this, though. I'd be remiss if I didn't single out Robert Williams. The guy was absolutely dominant. The guy had 9 blocks. That's the record for most blocks in a playoff game by a Boston Celtic. When Bill Russell played, they didn't keep that stat. They should have, but they didn't. Does Bill Russell have the true record? Probably, but if you go on basketballreference.com, you'll see Robert Williams as having that record. We learned something. If you're driving and you see Robert Williams in the lane, just pull up for a midi or try to float it over him. Although, I wish you luck with that. Maybe try to get him into foul trouble. You can make the argument that Robert Williams was the best Celtic on Saturday night. If that holds true for the rest of the series, the Nets are going to dominate. Moving on now to Heat Bucks. And this was a really impressive win for the Bucks. They needed this win. I mean, the Heat were up late. And you saw on Twitter people saying this is going to be a repeat of what happened in the bubble. This Bucks team that was really, really good in the regular season loses to a Heat team that they should be beating. But Chris Middleton stepped up. What did I tell you? He'd need to step up if the Bucks were going to win this series. And he did. He was the high man on Saturday. It wasn't Giannis. It wasn't Jrue Holiday. It was Chris Middleton. You want to talk about a big three? The Bucks seem to have a little bit of a big three going. Giannis had 26 points and 18 rebounds. Chris Middleton had 27 points. He scored the game winner. Jrue Holiday had 20 points and 11 rebounds. I feel like if you don't watch the Bucks every day, you forget about Jrue Holiday. You forget, A, that he's on the Bucks, and B, how good he is. But I really like Jrue Holiday. He fits that Bucks team perfectly. Gives him a playmaker, gives him another shooter, gives him a great defensive player. Jrue Holiday fits the Bucks perfectly. Brook Lopez too. Stretch 5, had 18 points and 8 rebounds. The Bucks are a scary team. Like, not to look too far ahead, but a Nets-Bucks second-round matchup is going to be really, really good. Now, it's kind of funny. The Bucks did the same thing that the Nets did on Saturday. Hit brick after brick after brick. The Bucks shot just 16% from beyond the arc. Excluding Chris Middleton, the Bucks only hit 2 threes. The Heat did a fantastic job defending the perimeter. That's why this game was so close. The Bucks did a great job of changing up their offense. The Bucks and Nets played very similar games. But you know what? Great teams just find a way to win. That's what the Bucks did. Although I will say this game wasn't as much of a Bucks win as much as it was a Heat loss. The two best players on the Heat, Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, only combined for 26 points. They only hit 8 field goals. Butler shot 4 for 22 from the field and 2 for 9 from beyond the arc. Adebayo shot just 4 for 15 from the field. That's not going to work. You cannot have your two best players no-show and beat this Bucks team. I mean, I give Goran Dragic credit. I give Duncan Robinson credit. They both stepped up and played really, really well. But they need help from their big guns. Butler and Adebayo can't no-show like that. That's a loss that's going to sting. What that game proved is that this is a very even series. It's going to be a very fun series to watch. Game 2 is tonight, 7:30 start. I'll record it. I'm not going to watch it live. The Islanders are on. I'm watching the Islanders live. Speaking of watching games live, I watched Knicks-Hawks live. And I don't know what made me happier. Seeing the Nets win or seeing the Knicks lose. No, I'm just kidding. It was the Nets winning. But watching the Knicks lose, I was very happy. Oh my goodness gracious. Julius Randle? The All-Star? Shooting just 6 for 23 from the field? That's your guy? I mean, come on. I'm sorry, but if your best player is Alec Burks, you're not gonna win. I mean, I gotta tell you, I was really disappointed in the Knicks. Like, I fully expected them to not shut down Trae Young, because Young will always get his, but to slow him down. They didn't slow Young down. He had 32 points. Lou Williams. Sweet Lou Williams. Comes off the bench and gives the Hawks a shot in the arm? Come on, you can't allow that if you're Tibbs. By the way, I'm like 99% sure it's Tom Thibodeau, not Thibodeau. That's what Spiro Ditas kept saying, Thibodeau. You ever see In the Heat of the Night? The main character, played by Sidney Poitier, Virgil Tibbs. Yeah, no, it's Tibbs, Virgil Tibbs. They call him Mr. Tibbs. Great, great, great movie. This was a really bad loss for the Knicks. You have the Garden absolutely rocking. 15,047 people were at the Garden to watch that game. The vast majority of them were Knicks fans. I can't say all of them, because Evan Roberts was there. You've got to win that game. You've got Spike Lee going nuts. You've got Tracy Morgan there. That's a game that you should win. The Knicks are better than the Hawks. But on that final possession, Trae Young puts Frank Ntilikina in a blender? That's a terrible job by Tibbs. How do you put Frank Ntilikina out there after I don't think he had played a second of that game? Oh, Jacob, he's the best defensive point guard on the Knicks. Look, there was a time when I defended Ntilikina. That ship has long sailed. The reality is he's a bust. He's like Frederick Weiss. International players that the Knicks take that don't work out. Get upset at Ntilikina. I get that. That's fine. I have no problem with that. But you've got to get on Tibbs a little bit too. The biggest moment of the game, and you put in a guy who it's clear you don't trust. You know how I know you don't trust him? Because he's played less than 10 minutes per game this year. He only played 32 seconds yesterday. Why was he in it all? If this Knicks team is so great defensively, why do you need to go the extra mile and put in a quote-unquote defensive specialist? That doesn't make sense. Thibodeau deserves a lot of heat, let me tell you. Ntilikina does too. Because at the end of the day, that's your moment. If you can lock down Trae Young, congratulations. You just secured a spot in the NBA next year. That's your moment and you need to seize on it. Now, he'll have to go back to Europe if he wants to continue playing basketball. I will say this. It was great to see Young embrace the villain role. He said that he takes it as a compliment. Hey, Reggie Miller did it. He's a Hall of Famer. Third best shooter in NBA history. I mean, it's impressive what Trae Young did. His first ever playoff game. And he hits the game-winning shot. Yes, you knew that Trae Young would take that shot. But to hit it is really, really impressive. All in all, the Brooklyn Nets are my favorite team. They'll always be my favorite team. But at this very moment, my second favorite team is the Atlanta Hawks. I just may go out and buy a Bob Pettit jersey. Moving on now to the Western Conference. And the biggest upset that we saw over the weekend in the NBA. Great weekend of basketball. No blowouts. The biggest margin of victory that any team had was 14 points. Trailblazers Nuggets. But the Nuggets were leading at the half. They were only down by 5 headed into the fourth quarter. You couldn't turn that game off. Great weekend for the NBA, really. But going over to Grizzlies Jazz, it seems like there may be some trouble brewing. Donovan Mitchell didn't play. He has a sprained right ankle. He hasn't played since April 16th. Now, the Jazz held their own without him. They went 10-6. They got the 1 seed. But still, Mitchell is the best player on the Jazz. I think everyone's expectation was that Mitchell would play. For him to be held out was surprising. And make no mistake about it, if he had played, the Jazz would have won. The Jazz only lost by 3. I think it's a fair bet to say that Donovan Mitchell would have more than made up for that difference. There was a report that just came out from Brian Windhorst and Tim McMahon of ESPN that says that Mitchell is incensed over being held out. Now, this isn't the first time that we've heard of tension with the Jazz. You gotta remember, last year, there were rumors that we thought were unfounded. But maybe there's still some tension there that Mitchell was upset at Rudy Gobert for infecting him with the coronavirus. I mean, you gotta realize, Gobert was really laissez-faire about COVID. He touched all the microphones, wasn't taking it seriously. Then when that Jazz game got called and it came out that Gobert had the coronavirus, that's when we all took it seriously. Gobert wasn't the only one who wasn't taking it seriously, but the fact that he was patient 0 in the NBA and ultimately ended up infecting Donovan Mitchell, that's a bad look for him. So it's possible that Mitchell is still upset with the Jazz's medical staff about that. I will say this. It's a sprained ankle. How is he not ready to go over a month later? I understand being cautious in the regular season. It's all about the playoffs. Every team does it. And you don't want to be the Golden State Warriors forcing a guy out there who isn't ready and he ends up suffering a more serious injury. Cough, cough, Kevin Durant. I understand that. I mean, look, I'm not a doctor. I haven't seen the medical records. But it does seem kind of weird that Donovan Mitchell isn't ready to play over a month after suffering a sprained ankle. Especially when we're in the playoffs. I mean, I'll say this, if you're Quinn Snyder, sometimes you need to disregard the training staff's recommendation. You can say, my star player says that he's okay, he knows his body better than anyone. This is the playoffs. I want him out there. You can have Mitchell on a minutes restriction. That's fine. If Donovan Mitchell only plays 10 minutes in that game, the Jazz win. Mitchell does have a right to be upset. Now, the key for the Jazz is going to be calming him down. Okay, I get that you're upset. We messed up. We're sorry. It's only one game. You're still in a great spot if you're the Jazz. This series isn't over by any stretch. But Mitchell needs to play on Wednesday. Period. Case closed. When I come back from the Nassau Coliseum, I want to see Donovan Mitchell playing. It's just that simple. Moving on now to Lakers Suns. And you remember when I said that the Suns may not be ready for the playoffs? This is their first time in the playoffs. That doesn't seem right. Anytime you can hold LeBron James and Anthony Davis to 31 combined points is really, really impressive. The Lakers shot just 27% from beyond the arc. The Suns thoroughly outplayed the Lakers. I mean, you've got Chris Paul suffering what appeared to be a pretty nasty shoulder injury after colliding with his teammate Cameron Johnson. It's clear he's not at 100%. He only scored 7 points, but you still win that game. You hold the Lakers to just 90 points. You know how many points the Lakers averaged this year? 109.5. I'll repeat what I said previously. Anytime you can hold a team to 20 points under their scoring average, you've got a great chance of winning. The Suns just showed the entire NBA world that they're ready to go. They can play under the bright lights. They're not going to be overwhelmed by it. Even when their second best player isn't playing at 100%, Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton will step up and dominate. This was a really impressive win for the Suns. It's the kind of win that makes you step back and say, whoa, wait a minute. You know, maybe we need to take the Suns seriously here. If the Lakers are going to pull off the upset, they need a split. I don't think they can go down 2-0 and expect to win. I don't care that they're going back to the Staples Center. The Lakers need to show that they're the better team sooner rather than later. Moving on now to Trailblazers Nuggets. And the Trailblazers probably played the best overall game out of any NBA team over the weekend. Their offense was clicking on all cylinders, 47% from the field, 48% from beyond the arc, 95% from the charity stripe. Defensively, I thought they were really good. Their perimeter defense was really good. The Nuggets only hit 31% of their threes. The Nuggets only got to the free throw line 8 times. The discipline that the Trailblazers played with on Saturday was incredible. I know that the Nuggets don't get to the free throw line a lot. They're the fourth worst team in the NBA in terms of free throws made and free throws attempted. But still, to only get to the charity stripe 8 times, that's terrible. They usually attempt 19.5 free throws per game. They attempted over 10 less than they usually do. That's ridiculous. That's not going to work. I will say this, Aaron Gordon did impress me. You knew that Jokic was going to do Joker things. You knew that Porter was going to do MPJ things. Aaron Gordon really needed to step up. He's kind of underwhelmed since coming to the Nuggets. And he played well. He had 16 points and 8 rebounds, shot the ball efficiently. Monte Morris was good, 10 points and 5 assists. But the Blazers just had an incredible game. Watching that game, you thought that this team could have a legitimate chance of winning the NBA title. I mean, look, I think that they're going to beat the Nuggets. I said that on Saturday. But the way that they played on Saturday, they may do more than that. They could surprise some people. They dominated. They scored the second most points out of any team in the NBA over the weekend. They were only 2 points behind the Sixers. I was very, very impressed with the Portland Trailblazers. Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum always show up with the lights on bright. It's up to the other guys to step up, and they did. Melo stepped up with 18 points. Yusuf Nurkic had a double-double. Anthony Simons had 14 points. Very impressive win for Portland. The last NBA game to talk about is Mavericks Clippers. Now, the one thing I'll say is that Kawhi Leonard and Paul George showed up. They each scored over 20 points. They both shot the ball efficiently. They didn't hit their threes, but their field goal percentage was good. But the supporting cast was dreadful. Marcus Morris only had 4 points. He played 32 minutes. Playoff Rondo really didn't show up a lot. He did a little bit, but not a lot. Reggie Jackson wasn't good. I don't know why Serge Ibaka only played 12 minutes. I mean, this was an impressive win for the Mavericks. Luka had a triple-double. He's always going to do Luka things. Love watching him play. But you know what? Kristaps Porzingis wasn't even the second-best Maverick. It was Tim Hardaway Jr. He had 21 points. In fact, Porzingis wasn't even the third-best Maverick or the fourth-best Maverick. He was the fifth-best Maverick. Dorian Finney-Smith and Jalen Brunson were both better than him. The fact that the Mavericks supporting cast was able to step up was a really, really good sign for them. This series could come down to the supporting casts. Tim Hardaway Jr., Dorian Finney-Smith, Jalen Brunson, and Maxi Kleber versus Marcus Morris, Patrick Beverley, Ivica Zubac, Nick Batum, Rajon Rondo, Reggie Jackson, and Serge Ibaka. You'd think that the Clippers would have an edge, but they didn't on Saturday. Alright, now I'll give you some NHL Valk talk. And I will start with Penguins Islanders, the series that is now down to a best 2 out of 3. Obviously, the Islanders needed to win Game 4. Obviously, they did. Ilya Sorokin was absolutely incredible. He's going to start the rest of this series and hopefully beyond. The Islanders' power play was really good. I mean, the death blow came in the third period for the Penguins, when in the span of 24 seconds, Oliver Wahlstrom and Jordan Eberle both scored power play goals. After that, let me tell you, everyone in the vaccinated section that I was in started going nuts. We were hugging each other, high-fiving each other. The Islanders needed to win that game, and they did. And just for whatever it's worth, yes, I'm vaccinated. I've been vaccinated fully for 2 months. Get vaccinated. I don't know what you're waiting for if you haven't already. Stop being an idiot, okay? Just get it. I will say this. Islanders fans, as much as I hate them, I am a self-hating Islanders fan. They're a very close-knit unit. There's a very strong bond there. It was great to share that bond with the people that I just so happened to be sitting near. Like, I was talking to the people sitting next to me on Thursday. I did it on Saturday. I'm going to do it on Wednesday. Sign guy was sitting like 2 seats over from me. Really nice guy. But look, the Islanders need to win this game tonight, and the Penguins do too. Whoever wins the game tonight is winning the series. I did say Penguins in 6. That's still very possible. I don't like that this game is in Pittsburgh. But the Islanders did win a game in Pittsburgh. They won Game 1 with Sorokin starting. Here's hoping that's a good omen. I don't want the Nassau Coliseum to have its last Islanders game being the Islanders getting eliminated from the Stanley Cup playoffs. Let's close out the barn with a 5th cup, to quote Sign Guy. Moving on now to Bruins Capitals. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. In games 4 and 5, it was pretty clear that the Bruins were the better team. I did say that the Bruins would win, and I got it right. So, hey, good job by me. There's no shame in losing to a better team, but still, in games 3, 4, and 5, the Capitals only scored 4 goals. That's tough. Tuukka Rask was great. The Bruins' offense was clicking on all cylinders. The Bruins are a really, really scary team. And what ticks me off is they're going to be rested when they're going up against the Islanders. I don't see rust being a big issue for them. I think it plays into the Bruins' hands perfectly. I'll say this. As an Islanders fan, I wanted them to face the Penguins because I thought they matched up well with the Penguins. I thought they could beat them. I've been proven right. I don't think they have a chance against the Bruins. I just think the Bruins are far, far, far too talented. They're exponentially better. The Bruins will steamroll the Islanders or the Penguins. Moving on now to the North Division, I'll start with Leafs-Habs. Best rivalry in the sport. And I give the Leafs credit for using the John Tavares injury as motivation. You could tell that's what they did. It looked like after the Kotkaniemi goal, they were going to be dead to the world. Then the Leafs score 5 unanswered goals. They solved Carey Price. The second period, they absolutely dominated. The Leafs had 20 shots on goal in the second period. You know how many shots the Canadiens had in the whole game? 23. Jack Campbell stood on his head, only allowed 1 goal. Showed why I have a lot of confidence in him. I mean, this is going to be a fun series. And I'll say this. It's going to be even more fun because tonight we'll see the playoff debut of Cole Caulfield. The Canadiens' hotshot rookie. He had 5 points in 10 games this year. He had 4 goals and 1 assist. Eric Stahl isn't 100%, so Dominique Ducharme is putting Caulfield in. I'm going to be really excited to see what he can do. This is the best rivalry in the NHL. As if we needed another subplot, we now have the playoff debut of one of the most exciting young rookies in the sport. Gotta love it. Moving on now to Oilers-Jets. An incredibly surprising series. I picked the Oilers to win it. It looks like they're going to get swept. I mean, let me ask you something. If they get swept, does Dave Tippett go? I feel like it's a possibility. I mean, let's be clear. In the bubble, they lost to an inferior Blackhawks team. Now they're losing to a Jets team that they're exponentially better than. I mean, here's how bad the Oilers have been. Before Game 3, Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid were off the score sheet. Now, granted, they showed up yesterday, but Mike Smith folded like a cheap suit. He allowed 5 goals. So the game that McDavid and Draisaitl show up in, the Oilers lose. I feel like you need to fire Tippett if the Jets win this series. I mean, the Jets can sweep the Oilers tonight. If that happens, Tippett needs to go. It's just that simple. Don't even let him go back to Edmonton. Leave him on the side of the road. Do what the Panthers did to Gerard Gallant. This is an incredibly disappointing series for the Oilers. They are exponentially better than this. Series changes are going to need to be made if the Oilers can't do what the 42 Leafs, the 75 Islanders, and the 04 Red Sox did. Come back from 3-0 down. Moving on now to Hurricanes Predators. An incredibly exciting series. Without question, the second best series that we've had so far. The best series has been Penguins Islanders. In fact, if I'm putting my biases aside, if you wanted to say that Hurricanes Predators was better, I'd understand it. The last 2 games went into double overtime. The Predators won both of them. That's a bad job by Alex Nedeljkovic. And I think that's how he pronounces it, not Nedeljkovic. Because I was listening to the Hurricanes radio feed as I was coming back from yesterday's Yankees game, and they were pronouncing it Nedeljkovic, not Nedeljkovic. So look, I think I'm just going to call him Ned. That's nothing against Ned. At the end of the day, the Hurricanes should be able to score one more goal. Score it in the third period. Score it in overtime. Don't want to get to double overtime. It's hard to stand on your head for 3 periods, let alone 4, and then 5. I don't blame Ned 1 second for losing these 2 games in double overtime. Does it hurt that he's let the Predators back into this series? Yes, but it's really not his doing. It's the Hurricanes' doing for not being able to score. You've got to be able to get one more puck past UC Saros. I mean, Saros has been standing on his head. In games 3 and 4, he's made over 50 saves. That's incredible. It looked like the Hurricanes were going to run away with this series. The Predators have come storming back. This is a really, really fun series. What hasn't been a fun series is Panthers Lightning. I told Joel Quenneville to start Spencer Knight. I told him he should have started Game 4. He decided to go with Bobrovsky. He allowed 5 goals on 14 shots. I mean, now it seems like Knight's going to start, but it's too little too late. Do you really think that Spencer Knight is going to win 3 straight games? No, if you were going to make that move, you've got to make it before Game 4, not after Game 4. This series is over. Forget about it. The Lightning are going to win. Maybe Spencer Knight will steal this game, but he won't steal Game 6 in Tampa Bay. And Sergei Bobrovsky needs to be traded. It's just that simple. I don't know how you're going to do it if you're Bill Zito, but you've got to work some magic because Sergei Bobrovsky cannot be a Panther anymore. You've got to roll with Knight and Drieger as his backup. Moving on now to Avalanche Blues. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I don't know why I thought that the Blues could take a game. I guess I was just trying to make Eric happy. It was clear that the Avalanche were the better team. They scored at least 4 goals in every game. Jordan Binnington really didn't play that well in games 3 and 4. The Avalanche were by far and away the better team. They're going to be a very tough team to beat. I don't see how the Golden Knights are going to beat the Avalanche. And that is who the Avalanche are going to face. I don't see how the Wild can come back from 3-1 down. You've got Marc-Andre Fleury looking like the Fleury of old. He stood on his head in every game. The highest number of goals that the Wild have scored in a game in this series has been 2. Now, those 2 goals came on just 16 shots. And they both came in the first period. That was impressive. The Wild had 7 shots in the first period of Game 3. They scored on 2. You thought, okay, the Wild are going to take the lead in this series, but then the Golden Knights scored 5 straight goals. And then Game 4, Fleury stopped all 35 wild shots. Marc-Andre Fleury is by far and away the best goalie in these playoffs. That does make the Golden Knights a scary team. The Avalanche won't steamroll the Golden Knights like they steamrolled the Blues, but they'll still win. It'll be a competitive series, though. Yeah, I'm counting out the Wild. I'm sorry. They just really haven't impressed me in this series after Game 1. New York Yankees show comes your way tonight. Tomorrow on the regular episode of the Jacob Valk Show, I'm going to recap all of tonight's playoff games and preview all of tomorrow's playoff games. I'm also going to break down some miscellaneous sports news. I wanted to do it today, but this show is going too long. I'll save it for tomorrow. It'll still be prescient, I promise. Until next time, I am Jacob Valk saying that I'm not sure which is more insulting, being offered in a trade or having it turned down.